make like a podcast and whatnot. So
Cool.
I'm excited to do this with you.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I posted up on Instagram and said, who should I, have on the podcast? And Nikki was like, my husband. I was like, all right, let's do it.
Yeah.
So cool, man. Well, first off, I have like 12 listeners, so don't sweat it too much. And
Okay.
kind of what I wanted to have on you when she said you would be interested in being on here, I think it would be a great fit. We can talk about kind of your background,
Yeah.
your schooling, and then I'm actually really interested in what you sent me over in terms of what you guys are studying right now as well. So we'll probably
Yeah.
get into that towards the end. So if
Okay.
you can, just a quick summary of your background.
Yeah. Yeah. So I've always been into sports and athletics ever since I was really little, playing all kinds of different sports. But mainly the ones I focused on when I was, in high school, were football, basketball, and track. And kind of cultivated that um, love, I guess, through just lots of hard work and um, you know continuing to try to push the boundaries. And eventually, I got a scholarship to go to UC Davis to run track, and I was a pole vaulter, so I was running and jumping all sorts of stuff.
Yeah.
But that kind of really started the interest for me, and I thought, as far as the academics go, I thought, I wanted to get into PT or something of that nature when I was an undergrad. But really kind of I got drawn into the physiology and stuff like that in my undergrad, towards the end of my undergrad, and ended up taking a course that really kind of changed my mind, I guess, about what I wanted to do. And in the course of that, transition, I was coming to ISU to continue to pole vault and jump with the coach at ISU, who's now since retired. But he, my love for vaulting kind of led me to ISU, and I did the master's in athletic administration and physical education kind of on the side. I guess I was really mainly interested in continuing to jump and to perform well. And the getting the master's was just kind of a bonus. But when I started to kind of transition out of vaulting, it was a kind of a series of injuries and issues that I've had, jumping so long and at such a intense level. I was drawn back to kind of the education and the physiology, and I wanted to come back and do my PhD in kind of a related field. Now I study exercise and the effects on aging. So I'm really interested in kind of instead of the performance side of it, that's what kind of got me into the exercise physiology. Now it's more so kind of the health benefits. So I've transitioned from sort of this egocentric view and trying to improve my own performance to now how can I help improve the lives of other people, and particularly with aging populations. So
Rad.
that's
So
kind of the background.
that just gave me like a million things I want to ask you about. So
Okay.
at ISU, real quick, so that was post when you were jumping there, that was post collegiate. That was like training
Yeah.
beyond collegiate.
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. How
Yeah.
was that?
So,
What was your goal? Were you
I was training to be, I was hoping to be and make it to the Olympics. That was the ultimate goal. And I never, it was, I like to tell people that it was post collegiate. It wasn't really like professional, even though technically it was, because I did end up winning like a small amount of money at one meet that I went to. But
There you go.
yeah, it was that was definitely a highlight. But I wasn't good enough to be one of the top jumpers in the country. There were still quite a lot of people that were better than me, but I was trying to make it to the Olympics.
Yeah. So I mean, you have the experience at least of that amount of dedication and that amount of kind of putting a focus on something to where you're trying to be the best in the world.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So I have no idea reference wise, but for those, if any of you listening, a pole vault, what was your best jump ever?
My best jump ever was 17.8 and a half,
Which
so
sounds really
17,
high.
17 feet, 8.5 inches. Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah.
Um, it's, yeah, I would say like 18 feet is like the threshold to be considered like an elite jumper.
Okay.
So I wasn't quite there, but I was close.
Close.
Yeah, and I'm still kind of bitter about that today. I should have had 18 feet a couple of times and just barely missed it. So,
So you were jumping, you still continue to do it.
not now,
Oh,
but,
I thought
I
yeah.
mean, in my time at ISU, I should have made 18 feet. I should have been, yeah.
Yeah.
But it's all right. It
Uh,
happens.
awesome. So I'm gonna bring it back a little bit just because I just have some. I'm gonna kind of bring my own agenda into it. So I'm curious. In those younger years, so middle school, high school, did you have like a good training regimen, or now that you know what you know, were you doing things that, because I know you dealt with some injuries.
Yeah. I do think, well, as far as like middle school and high school, there was definitely not so much in middle school, but in high school, there's definitely a pretty well established training program with both football and track and field. So the high school that I went to is pretty well known for their football team and the track and field team actually as well. So my coaches on both of those teams were really instrumental in, I think, forming me into a well-rounded athlete.
Yeah.
Um, and definitely the weight training component that I got from football was a big benefit to me in track and field, kind of moving forward with my career, because it kind of helped instill some of the work ethic and passion for the weight room that I think helped me get to the point that I was at.
Yeah.
Without that, there probably would have never been a professional push.
Yeah.
You know,
Awesome. Did you feel prepared when you went to UC Davis? Like when you walked weight room wise, like did you walk in there and know a lot of what they were doing and be able to transition quickly, or did you have to go through a whole transition period?
no, yeah, I felt much more at home in the weight room than I think most high school kids coming into college, especially in track and field. You get a lot of athletes that are just really good high school athletes that don't actually, like, they didn't spend a whole lot of time in the weight room if all they focused on was track.
Yeah.
And we get into the weight room and their eyes get really wide because they've never lifted a weight in their life, or it was a very small component of their training where, I spent quite a lot of time in the weight room in my high school year. So I felt way more comfortable and able to push myself in the weight room. I had never done any Olympic lifting up until like when I got into college, maybe a little bit, in high school, but I don't remember it. But the Olympic lifts I felt like they were the most fun, and I enjoyed doing those a lot. And I know a lot of people when I was at Davis that were averse to that, and they didn't
Yeah.
really enjoy that stuff. So, but I do think that it was a big, because there's such powerful movements and whole body exercises that they're really beneficial for developing power and
Yeah,
speed and
explosive.
stuff like that.
Yeah, for sure. That's awesome because I've kind of been on that topic of myself in my head is because I have a gym here in Pocatello now, and we're starting to get a poll. We've been open for about almost a year, but we're starting to get. We only do one-on-one and individual and small group, but we have a good group of high school kids that are starting to come in.
Mm-hmm.
And then online, I'm working with. Actually, I got a couple track and field high school kids, and it's all relatively new for those guys. But even just so these guys they're pretty high level already high school runners in Preston, and they have no experience like lifting at all in the gym. So the idea is to help those guys get like a base level of strength like you're talking about, because like literally we back squatted once and he was sore for a week. So it's
Yeah.
like, and what will happen is maybe he can get away in high school, but then if he gets picked up by college, right, all of a sudden he's gonna be expected to do this training, and then best case, I mean, worst case, he gets injured. Best case, I think it still slow down his progression at the college and his ability to run if he's
Mm-hmm.
sore all the time, because now he's expected to do things that he's never done before.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
we've been doing a big focus on getting high school kids, but really, we have experience in the collegiate weight room, and we want to prepare them to step in like a transition smoothly. So like
Yeah.
seamless transition, teach them the movements they're going to need to know how to do, and
Right.
teach them how to move well. So I was just interested in how, because it seems like it's pretty consistent with people that are successful in sports. Almost always they have a very good background, and we're able to move into like a college scene feeling somewhat comfortable, and we're able to push their training because they kind of knew what they were doing.
Right. Yeah. I do think that's a big component to it because, even I felt like in my experience at Davis, even people who were somewhat familiar with the weight room still wouldn't necessarily want to push themselves super hard because they were afraid of being sore for the next day, the workout on the track the next day. Where I was kind of the opposite. I was like,
Yeah.
balls to the wall in the weight room, and I didn't care if I was sore the next day. I knew it was going to help me. So, but the underlying kind of basic movements that you need to learn, I think, to be comfortable in the weight room should be started early in high school and even middle school if you can. Because I mean there has been, I think the this is probably since gone, but the belief that you shouldn't have young kids lifting weights is not necessarily true anymore. I don't think. I mean, I guess if you have any experience in that
Uh,
area.
Yeah, the stigma is kind of, I mean, I believe it still probably exists, but there's definitely research out there that says, no, like the only time it's going to hurt your kid is if, he's doing it improperly, overloading, whatever. So I would recommend a coach at that age, or
Right.
having like a watchful eye on it, like a parent that's well versed in the weight room.
Right.
But in terms of like kids lifting, it's like, so they can't go outside and play because they might, pick up their buddy, or it's just like,
Right. Right.
it was just kind of this thing where, yeah, I never really bought into it, and luckily enough people didn't buy into it that they've done some research on it and put it out there. But
Yeah.
yeah, I'll train a kid. I've trained kids as young, like we start at 8 years old. We don't use a barbell a ton, but we're just teaching the primal movement patterns. We teach them how to
Mhm.
step up, how to lunge, how to squat, how to press, how to pull, horizontal and vertical. And then
Yeah.
those movements, those basic, like those category of movements, is exactly what carries. That's the only movements a human body does, right? So then they carry
Yeah.
over to the field in the future because they're able to step well, or step up well. So they're probably a decent sprinter because they know how to pull their knee high and drive through the floor and pull with the
Right.
hamstring. Like, so a lot of that is just, I always try to get people to get the kids in, but you'll still run into, oh no, my kid probably shouldn't be
Yeah.
pushing himself at 13. You're like, yeah, you know.
Yeah. And then that's the irony, because then they get down to a field or a court or whatever in high school, and the competition level jumps up, and they
Yeah.
end up getting hurt because they're not strong enough or
Yeah.
powerful enough to withstand some of the, especially in like things like football and basketball,
Yeah.
contact sports.
And that even gets in, but that even leads you down the road of like a lot of these kids are getting injured too because of overuse, right? So then you'll have parents
Mhm.
that are like, no, they can't lift weights or have a structured strength program, but they're going to play 4 sports and play year round. And there's going
Mhm.
to be no training to counteract what they're doing. So like if you have a volleyball player or you have somebody that's rotating one way, like if you're not, track and field, you probably jumped off one leg when you would go to do like the same leg every time when you went to do your pole
Yeah.
vault. If you're not training those imbalances, because you're going to create imbalances, that's part of playing sport. So if
Yeah.
you're not fighting those or trying to reverse them or at least alleviate some of that, then people start to get injured.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think, the literature is definitely pretty clear in stating that young kids should be doing a variety of different sports and not just specializing in one. But I think that there's definitely going to be some more push into the weight room as kind of a tool to reduce some of the injuries that you're seeing in overuse stuff, because you can definitely train in a way that doesn't cause an injury, and actually prevents future injuries if you know what you're doing. And so I think that um, that's kind of the key, though. You have to know what you're
Yeah.
doing.
Yeah. And a lot of it, what I run into that I just freaking slap my freaking forehead, is I'm like, you run into the moms that are like, yeah, I'm sending my kid to 5 QB camps this summer.
uh,
He doesn't have time to, work with a trainer. And I'm like, first off, 4 out of those 5 QB camps are just money makers. They're not really looking at your kid. Second
right.
off, like you need to utilize that time. Like, how about he goes to one camp this summer and has a coach for 3 or 4 months, and let's see what pays off more, like the 5 camps he did last summer, or let's see if we see a performance increase by having like a structured strength program with a lot of attention
Right.
for 4 months. Like,
Yeah.
and it's just a lot of people don't get it. They're like, he's just got to play his sport only, and he's got to go to 5 camps, and that's how he's going to get a college scholarship, which isn't always
Yeah.
the truth. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think, at that young developmental age, they have to be able to know, they have to practice moving their body in different ways to figure out, to then be good at specialization later. If
Mhm.
they don't know how to activate their glutes or whatever when they're sprinting and accelerating in a sprint, how are they going to be able to do anything
Yeah.
worthwhile in any sport, really?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's I think it's definitely one area where will improve with the young kids as far as strength training goes for development and that
Yeah.
sort of thing.
No, I think it's spreading, like the knowledge is spreading a little bit more that, it's important. I think that it's just ironic. I think high school strength coaches, like those guys almost have more responsibility than a collegiate strength coach. So like,
Yeah.
but it's flipped to where, they don't make any money, or it's not worth their time. So they're not as invested per se.
Yeah.
And even the college strength coach is underpaid in my opinion at most places, but because they spend a lot of time with the strength coach. And like you said, if anything, just being in that environment develops. I mean, if somebody can teach your kid how to look them in the eye, how to take feedback or like negative feedback and turn it into a positive, and like kind of make more of a resilient athlete. I mean, college coaches are looking for that too. Like college coaches are looking for, your kid can be as athletic as they come, but sometimes some coaches, if he's a prick or he doesn't listen or he just misbehaves, like that's it. And everything that every God-given talent he had, it doesn't matter.
Right.
You
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah. It's definitely there's nothing more humbling than failing on a squat attempt, or
yeah,
whatever, any lift. So I think that teaches them a little humble, to be humble in the weight room. That's definitely
yeah, do
one
you,
contribution to
yeah.
coachability.
Do you stay up to date with ISU at all, or not really?
I haven't been. No, I'm not familiar with any.
Yeah,
Well, actually, I did recently hear that the AD was let go.
Yeah. So Pauline, do you remember Pauline Theros?
Yeah, yeah,
She's the new AD, which is good. They got a new strength coach. It seems pretty good. I think they're taking some steps in the right direction. So I don't
yeah.
know. Is that Dave? Is Dave Nilsson still at ISU?
No, so he retired the actually the year I left. So in 2016, I think
Mm.
it was his last year. And now the track team, as far as I'm aware, is still being coached by his predecessor, Hillary Merkley.
Mm.
She was one of his athletes,
Okay.
and came back to coach under him, and then he left and she
Yeah.
stepped in. Yeah.
So did he coach Stacy Dragila? Is that how he?
Yes.
Okay. So
Yep.
that's the name people might know, right?
Yeah.
In the pole
Yeah.
vault. Yeah.
So Stacy, I met Stacy for the first time when I was at ISU. When I like first got to ISU, I think it was the summer of 2013. And being a pole vaulter, the name. She was the first female gold medalist in the pole vault, because they didn't even have pole vault until 2000 in the Olympics,
Yeah.
which is crazy. But um, yeah, so she was the very first female gold medalist, and I remember seeing her on the track and meeting her for the first time, and just like you have that like
Yeah.
jaw open, like, wow, this is
Wow.
Stacy Gila. And then she's just super nice, down to earth.
Hmm.
That was a pretty cool experience. And I've interacted with her, several times since then when I was jumping. Um, and she was always super helpful, especially if like Dave wasn't around. She would give some advice here and there, like let you know if you're doing
Yeah.
something wrong
So
or
did you get to
whatever.
train like alongside her, or was she kind of more of like a
No, she had
pedestal?
retired by the time that I had gotten there. She was an athlete there in the early '90s, and then stayed and trained with Dave until the mid like 2002 or 2003, I think.
Yeah.
And she ended up retiring. I don't know what the timeline was, but the mid 2000s, I think, is when she was retired. So she's coaching now, and I believe in Boise. She has a coaching. She has a facility, I think, that she trains people at. So
Yeah, that's awesome, man. Maybe that kind of
yeah.
fueled your, being around people that are great. It makes you want to be
Oh
great.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. It contributes because you see firsthand the dedication and focus, and I think that was part of my motivation to move to ISU, is because Dave had created this environment, particularly with pole vaulters. There just people just like gravitated to him, and that was the environment that I wanted to put myself in, because I wanted to compete and be the best I could be.
Yeah, and get better.
And yeah, you gotta put yourself in the environment around people that are as good or better than you,
Hmm.
to really continue to grow, I think.
Awesome. So it said you were dealing with a bunch of injuries in 2014 and 15.
Yeah.
What specifically?
So I I had actually a double hernia when I
Okay.
was training, and this was I think in like December or January 20, 2013, 2014. So January of 2014, I think is probably when this occurred. Um, and I had to have surgery, and I was out for a couple of months. And I think the issue for me was more, had always been, with any injury that I've had, has always been more psychological really than the physical part of it. The the pain or discomfort or even the surgery really wasn't that big of a deal, but it was the stress of not being able to train and not trying to continue to progress, and feeling like I'm falling behind was a big a major issue and challenge for me to try to get through, and I'd always, come back too early or, with anything. Cause I just wanted to be back out on the field and jumping again. But
Yeah,
so that was,
that's funny because that's what I was gonna ask you more of what with the mental, because that's usually
yeah,
the struggle with the athletes. Like we know, you're gonna get hurt, like that's just part of it, or you're gonna have some injuries or pain. But when you
right.
are out and you can't do what you love to do, yeah, you did a great job of kind of explaining how how you felt about it and how you dealt with it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's really tough. And then, the injury that really like ended it for me, well, psychologically, was the kind of the final blow was, I broke my ankle, in gymnastics. So as vaulters, we had 2 days a week where we would go into the gym and do some gymnastic stuff, because it's very, gymnastic oriented. Everything after you take off in the pole vault, after you take off the ground, is all a gymnastic move, basically.
Yeah.
So we spent a lot of time in the gym, and we were warming up one day. This is about a week before the final competition of the season for me. And I was doing just a routine tumbling pass, round off back tuck, and uh, I came down and just landed weird, and my right ankle like just buckled underneath me and felt a pop, and just I went down hard, and I kind of hobbled around on it for a few days before going in to see a doctor that did an X-ray and said I had a little avulsion fracture, which means the tendon on the inside of my ankle, the ligament that connects the big bone on the malleolus on the tibia on the inside of your ankle,
Yeah.
and the other small bones, had pulled some of the bone off, pulled it away from itself, on the on the inside of the ankle. And so I was walking around for a few days with a broken ankle, and
Yeah.
ended up having to be put in a boot and crutches for 4 weeks. And that was pretty. That was kind of the final blow
Straw.
for me. Yeah.
Does that one still bother you at all?
Yeah, I can still feel my ankle.
Yeah.
When if I run for like a long distance, usually like by the end of the run, I can feel it, and through the next day. And it's not really where it broke, but just the joint itself feels swollen and tight.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, I tore my Achilles like 2.5 years ago, and it's still, I could have surgery and everything, but I mean, I can kind of do it, but I still I'll go to decelerate sometimes. I'm just like, oh man, like it
you
definitely
can feel
keeps
it.
me from doing some stuff I'd want to do in terms of like long sprints, quick stops. Like when I'm playing sports, I can definitely be like, oh man, lost a
Yeah.
step. And I'm trying to rehab and stuff, but I feel like they take a long time, and it's the whole time. It's just that whole kind of mental battle of,
Yeah.
I'm not even like competing in anything. I just, you just want to be able to do the things you want to do.
Right.
Like you want to
Yeah.
go out and play some pickup basketball with your buddy and not have your Achilles hurt every time.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. So definitely dealt with my fair share of injuries. So I kind of know the pain of it. And, I can't imagine though, like making it that far and be training that hard and with that in mind, in like that goal. And then just having kind of repeated injuries and just situation, just be like, well, it's not going to pan out for me.
Yeah. Yeah. It was definitely crushing. I mean, I did continue to train after that, but I never, even 6 months after, you could just feel it when I was running and
Yeah.
jumping. And so I never really felt like I wanted to like push it as hard as I could. And I knew at that point, like I wasn't going to be able to train at the level that I wanted to.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up kind of, I slowly faded out of competing,
Yeah.
professionally, but that was kind of the defining moment that led me down that path,
Yeah.
so.
And at least, and what I find is I mean, typically you have people like that are good, you're really dedicated to something like athletics. And then, shit goes bad, and either you kind of just throw a pity party or you find another way somewhere else to put that energy. And it looks like you've put that energy towards, for me, it was into the more strength and conditioning side. And for you right now, it's the schooling, the teaching, or what, I don't know what you want to do after, but you're going to have a pretty sweet resume of
Yeah.
education. And
Yeah. And so I think I briefly mentioned, I had this one class that I took my last year as an undergrad at UC Davis that really, kind of pushed me to my interest towards the physiology of the performance side of things. And when I went to ISU, like I said, it was primarily to be training. And on the academic side of it, I felt like the classes were interesting and things and that sort of thing, but it wasn't like as gripping to me or
yeah,
enticing as some of the other stuff. So I wanted to go back and kind of change gears back to the physiology. And so I found a good home here at NAU for that. So.
yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So what were you studying when you were in Pocatello at the Pocatello Orthopedics and Sports Medicine? What were you researching?
So I was basically, it was a long kind of series of events, but Dr. Joseph at the Pocatello Orthopedics was the one who diagnosed me for the hernias. And so I had known him through that. And then I needed an MD on my committee for my thesis at ISU. And
Yeah.
so I asked him to be on my committee. And so that's how that relationship started. And then when I was done at ISU, I graduated in 2015. I needed a job. And so I just asked him, you got anything for me to do?
Yeah.
And so he just kind of found some odd things for me to do at the orthopedic center that he works at. And so I was mostly working on trying to find ways to improve patient outcomes in their clinic. So
Yeah.
most of the things that they see are either sports related injuries or orthopedic issues because of age, knee arthritis, shoulder, hip, all that kind of stuff. So they did all the, a lot of knee and hip replacements and shoulder replacements in that office. And Dr. Joseph was on kind of he was the guy to go to if you didn't want to do surgery, if you wanted to get
Yeah.
some injections or try some other treatment before you kind of went to the surgery. So he did a lot of different, injections in the joints for patients that were, I remember seeing one guy, he was like a regular. He'd come in every 3
Yeah.
months for an injection in both knees. And so a lot of my job was to try to figure out which treatments that he was doing was most beneficial and helps the most in the long run. And so I would kind of characterize it as doing research on patient outcomes and seeing how they felt and what treatments worked best for them, basically.
Yeah. That's awesome. When you finish schooling, what's your ideal thing you want to do? What realm do you want to get into?
I want to stay in academia. I want to teach and do research at a university. So be a professor.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah. My goal is, well, so after you finish a PhD, there's a position called a postdoc or postdoctoral researcher. So you have your PhD or you have a doctorate, but it's kind of like it's the equivalent of med school and residency. So the PhD
Okay.
is like is your the equivalent of medical school, but as a medical student, after you graduate med school, you don't actually go practice medicine. You do a residency for 4 years somewhere. And, then you're you're a doctor with training wheels. And that's sort of how it is with a PhD. You have a doctorate, but you still got your training wheels on. So you need to do a little more research. So basically, I want to get a postdoctoral position that basically just focuses on the research. You don't have to do any of the schooling or anything like that. Get some more publications under your belt, and then you can start applying for positions as a faculty member, basically.
Cool.
Yeah.
That's rad. Yeah. So more into the education piece.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So let's get into real quick. Let's talk, or maybe not quick, but let's talk about so you're, just for the listeners, you're studying the effects of exercise on aging, which you mentioned earlier. You said it's more of a health than a performance mentality. So who's the population that you're testing right now?
Right now, it's all healthy, older individuals. So they don't have any kind of disease, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, cancer, anything like that. They're older but otherwise healthy. So anybody above 60 qualifies for the study that we're conducting right now. And we're actually comparing the effects of younger and older individuals. So we have younger and older men and women that are in the study. And we're using the young individual sort of as a control, right? So a young person responds to a bout of exercise in a certain way. Does that differ when you're older? And then, how does that change with exercise training? If the older individuals are different initially in their response to an acute or a single exercise bout, how do they become more responsive like a younger individual after exercise training?
How quickly they adapt, essentially.
Yeah, basically.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and it says you're doing men and women, and you're doing aerobic and anaerobic is what I'm guessing, or is it just extra? Or is everything? Are you doing tests on
Everything
duration
is
and intensity, or is it more just?
everything is aerobic activity that we do in the lab. It's hard. It's a little bit harder to control for intensity and duration with resistance training. And there's a lot of labs in the country that do really good work in resistance training. The particular cell physiology that we're interested in is we think mostly activated by aerobic activity. So that is kind of one of the main reasons we chose to do aerobic exercise for this study.
Okay.
So
Yeah. What implements are you using? Are they running, walking, biking, what?
So so basically the study has 3 different visits. So the first is a VO2 max, or maximal aerobic capacity. So your listeners would probably know this as just a maximal aerobic capacity test or fitness to determine your fitness. It's the gold standard of measurement for how well you can take up and utilize oxygen.
Okay.
So we do that test first, and then they come back in and they do a second test. And the second test is a bike exercise for 30 minutes at 70% of what they maxed out at for the first visit. And we do a series of blood draws, and we measure certain markers in the white blood cells that we're interested in. So we want to see how exercise activates these pathways that are involved in stress resilience or stress resistance. So usually in a younger individual, they respond pretty robustly to any kind of physical activity, really. And one of the previous PhD students that my advisor had shown that there was a blunted response in this pathway in older individuals when they were comparing young and old, but they only did an acute, a single exercise bout. So we wanted to, extend that to see, okay, does this, there were two things. One was that first study didn't include women. So they were trying to control for the effects of estrogen, if there were any, on this signaling pathway. So we wanted to include women in the study, and then also if there were any differences after an exercise regimen. So if this pathway is blunted in a single exercise bout, can you restore it with regular exercise training? And so far what we're seeing with the data that we have collected is that they are improving their ability to respond to both an exercise stressor, like an acute exercise bout, and we do this other test that's a non-exercising stress test. That's basically we put a blood pressure cuff on their arm and inflate it for 10 minutes. So we leave it on, and it occludes some of the blood flow to their forearm. And we do this 3 different times with a small break in between. And what this does is it causes what's called an ischemic stress in their forearm. And you can measure certain metabolites in the blood after that. And usually what happens when you have a healthy and strong system that counters that stress, these metabolites remain relatively low in the blood. But what we've found is that older individuals, it peaks, and the peak is much higher, and it's sustained for a longer period of time than the younger individuals. Okay. So this just regular aerobic exercise for 8 weeks actually restores that and makes them look like they're responding like a young individual. So we think that's kind of the most powerful piece of evidence from our lab, really, is that from a health perspective, exercise restores an older individual's capacity to resist certain stressors.
Yeah.
And that's kind of the key public health piece, if you will.
So it's never too late.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It is never too late. These individuals, some of them have never exercised in their life, particularly the older women, which, this had never even occurred to me before we started this study. But I remember having a conversation with a woman that she was, saying women, when I was young, we weren't allowed to exercise. Like, that was frowned upon. They told you couldn't, you'd fall apart and you'd break. You're too frail and fragile, And so we obviously know that that's not true, but it's crazy to think that not that long ago that was the idea. That was the attitude.
Yeah. So are you finding that, let's say, an untrained individual, are they responding quicker than somebody that maybe has had I don't know if you're getting a pool of people that maybe have been more active throughout their life?
Yeah. There's definitely a relationship between the amount of physical activity that you have done previously and your responsiveness. So because this is a stress response system that we study, we are seeing that the more fit you are, the lower you have to the less you have to activate this system, which indicates that at the same given intensity, you're not as stressed out.
Yeah, basically. You're resilient to the stress or whatnot. And are these? I always am curious to look into, like, they just say if you've been active your entire life, and let's say these guys have stopped or they're not as active as they used to be. I mean, if they would adapt quicker if they got back into a more active lifestyle than someone that's untrained, or if the kind of idea would stay true where since somebody's untrained completely, like that woman's never exercised in her life, she's going to have a massive response right off the bat because, she's never exercised. So she's going to adapt. But then age, where does the age come in? There's a lot of
Yeah.
questions that it brings into my mind in
Yeah.
terms of
There's a lot of factors I think that come into play. I think generally speaking, as we get older, we become less sensitive to the stimulus. So
yeah,
at a given exercise intensity, an older individual probably gets less out of that, or a less of an adaptive response than a younger individual.
yeah,
Um, I would think that if you had been previously trained, and I don't know for sure, but I think if you had been previously trained, you would probably be able to respond and adapt more quickly than someone who hasn't.
yeah,
If you were an athlete for your entire life and then you stopped when you were 30 and you picked it back up when you were 50, at least doing something active, I would imagine you would probably respond better than somebody who had never done anything their entire life.
yeah. Well, let's hope so. All this work
Yeah,
we're putting in pays off, right?
yeah, right.
Another question: are you finding that women or men are having a better response between
Actually,
the
the
sexes?
women are having a better response than the men, which
Huh.
is really fascinating, particularly with the non-exercising challenge. There is a much stronger relationship between their fitness level and their fitness level changes over time, and their changes in the non-exercising stressor. So it appears, based on the data that we have, that um, the more a woman improves on her aerobic fitness, the greater her uh, capacity to resist any other kind of stressors.
Mm.
This is not necessarily the case for men. So the relationship is not the same, which is very interesting. We're
Well,
actually
yeah.
publishing a paper on this. Hopefully it's in review right now. So hopefully we'll get the word if it's accepted or not within the next couple of weeks. But yeah, the sex differences are fascinating.
That's interesting. It's almost like maybe it's because women in general have to be more resistant typically. I feel like they're just like more emotional creatures and are kind of developed to or adapted to, take care of children, like be able to care for someone and themselves at the
Yeah.
same time. Like, yeah, I just feel like there's a lot of stuff that goes on where they have to be more sensitive, but also be able to handle more stresses than men. Maybe we just
Yeah.
get really pissed off and like throw a fit, and then it's over. But
Right.
yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know. It's
Yeah.
interesting.
It is very interesting. And we've also, so all of the women in this current study that we're working on and we have started to publish is they're all in postmenopausal women. So they've
Okay.
lost the estrogen levels. They've gone way down compared to premenopausal women.
Hmm.
And so one of the other PhD students in my lab is working on studying this specifically in the effects of estrogen and postmenopausal women on these same sort of stressors. But we think that estrogen does have this protective effect. We've seen that in other studies from other labs that estrogen can be protective, particularly with the types of stressors that we are looking at.
Yeah.
Um, the interesting thing is that when you lose estrogen, after menopause, they you would expect to see a rapid increase in these kind of stress markers that we're looking at. But the the effects of exercise seem to be protective and blunting that. So, the question then becomes, are we, a lot of postmenopausal women are on hormone replacement therapy, right? So they take
Mm.
estrogen. So the question is, can they actually get away without taking estrogen if they just because
Exercise.
there's all sorts of side effects of taking exogenous estrogen. And so if you could get away without it and still get the same beneficial effects, then, that's a good option for some people. So we don't know for sure yet, whether or not that's the case, but that's kind of our hypothesis. Is what we're thinking is going to come to fruition with our studies. So
Yeah. Are you testing it all with the men, different like testosterone levels and the ability, or?
no, that's one thing that if we had done this differently, and we didn't really expect any sex differences, so we weren't looking at any sex hormones to begin with when we first started this study. But if we were to go back and design this again and do it again, I think looking at testosterone and estrogen levels in the blood would be a really interesting component, I think, to the study. But we don't have any of that data, so unfortunate. But
No, that's rad, man.
yeah,
That's all super interesting. It seems like it's pretty everywhere I run into, people I talk to. I think our generation is trying to, I think everything's become more holistic rather than just like, here's a fix.
right,
Like what you're talking about, maybe a doctor, because I know a doctor that's been fired for prescribing exercising instead of like a pill. So it's like, maybe in the future it's going to be more of, the push for staying healthy and exercise instead of immediately going to modern medicine. Maybe we're going to find a better balance of that. So
right,
I don't know. It's
yeah. No,
interesting.
I agree. I think the data are very clear in that exercise is really one of the best behavioral modifications that we can make to improve our health. The number one, well, I should say number two risk factor for all cause mortality is your fitness level. Number one being your age. So
Yeah.
your age predicts whether or not you're going to die
Yeah.
pretty easily. There's a pretty linear trend there,
Yeah.
but there's also a very strong relationship with how fit you are, and so the more fit you are, the less likely you're going to die of anything, really, even as you
Yeah.
get older. So that's definitely the message that we try to send to all the people that are in our studies, and just in general, to try to educate people about the benefits of exercise. It's not just about losing weight or looking good in a bathing suit.
Yeah. It's
It's
not
there's a lot more
superficial.
than that, right?
Yeah. No, it's cool. That's cool, man. Um, we're not, I'm not in that side of it, but what we're looking at right now and what's been pretty fun is my gym's now combined with the PT clinic. So I'm getting to work with
Oh,
more like
cool.
people from like an academia side.
Yeah,
'Cause for a long time, like, uh, I don't know. Sometimes there's just not a very good relationship between like different fields.
right.
And we're starting in Pocatello, and I'm sure other places have done this, but we're going to really try to bring together a bunch of different professionals and see if we work all together, what we can accomplish, right? So we're gonna have PT, we have massage therapy. It would be awesome, and it's been talked about to have like a mental health, wellness
Yeah, yeah,
therapist type of thing, and then everyone operates in the same building, so they come and they can see and work with people within like a unified setting of let's work on this, let's do this today,
yeah. That's
So
pretty cool.
yeah, it's pretty cool, man. And that's thanks for filling me in on that research.
Yeah,
That's awesome. And there's a ton of questions that pops in my head, but there's just so many it's like you never know. Like I'd want to know what type of like fitness markers are the ones like, because I know that strength also plays a big role in like being able to
yeah,
take care of yourself. Like yeah, we did some just not in-depth research, but for at the end of my schooling, we kind of worked with a pool of people that were outside of a or were be able to take care of themselves at home, and people that were in a
hmm
assisted living. And it came down to mostly base strength levels, like the ability to stand up, the ability to pick something up
Right.
off the counter and whatnot. So, and I'm
Yeah.
sure it all ties in though, in terms of, if you're fairly aerobically fit, you have the ability to also maintain and keep your strength up as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And my a lot of my interests are in the kind of the cell physiology and molecular biology of exercise and how we adapt. And it's interesting because at that level, uh, if you're looking at skeletal muscle cells and how they respond or adapt to different stimuli like resistance training versus endurance training, they're sort of at odds, right? The underlying molecular signals that occur are uh, they block each other, right? So
Yeah.
if the concurrent training effect, if you're doing both endurance and resistance training, you're going to get less of an improvement in both
Yeah.
compared to if you're doing one versus the other. And the problem is they're both good for you, and you want to do both. But
Yeah.
how do you appropriately design training to make sure you maximize the benefits of both, and you're getting the adaptations from both the resistance and the endurance training?
Yeah. Yeah. Because the trick is, how do you put them into like an aerobic state? Like, let's say you wanted to put them in an aerobic state, but you wanted to keep just a high intensity intervals. But then how do you, how do you apply that to a general population and not just like a fit 20-year-old that you can just
Right.
kill and mess up 100 times and then get it right one time? So
Yeah.
how do you take something where you can get them aerobically fit or increase their aerobic capacity, but with my bias, keep it more of a strength orientated
Yeah.
adaptation, you know, but
I
yeah, that's,
think, yeah, there are several different ways to do it. I think, well, really, any anybody's going to improve dramatically from going from not doing anything to doing something,
oh yeah,
right?
for sure.
So I think, if you have especially an older individual that wants to start training or whatever, they're going to be able to respond to both at a pretty decent level, at least for their health, I think.
Yeah.
It's the I guess the concurrent training effects really start to get intertwined and tangled up at the high levels of performance. Like so CrossFit people and people that are like decathletes and heptathletes, where you have to have a huge amount of strength, but also have an endurance component to your training and to your performance, is incredibly demanding. So one of the things that I've seen that you can do is kind of train if you split your training up, if you're a professional athlete or somebody who's trying to be like a high level,
Yeah.
but you're doing both, splitting your training up. So you're doing the endurance activity in the morning, and then your weight training in the evening, or vice versa, just so that you have enough time during the day to replenish your glycogen stores and your food
Yeah.
stores, basically.
For the recovery and adaptation period.
Right.
So, and
Yeah.
I've heard in my field that it's like 6 to 8 hours between sessions, but I don't know if that's been like actually nailed down or not. But
Yeah, that's what I'm familiar with as well. I would think that, doing something like an endurance training in the morning and lifting in the evening, right before or after dinner,
yeah,
you're going to maximize your effects of both training sessions.
yeah, for sure. Well, and then this will lead me into kind of my last question, and then we'll have to do another one. But
Okay.
because this is easy, we're going a long time.
Yeah.
So I want to know kind of, then I'll give you a little background on why I want to know this, but what you think made you take that leap from performance to health. And the reason I ask that is, I got, when I was done with sports, I got into the coaching, strength conditioning side. and you always have that idea of I want to work with the best athletes. You make the better best, and that's kind of your vision for it. But over my 10 years of coaching, it's been more of I actually almost enjoy now. I have a mixed population. I have people that are international weightlifters, and I have high school athletes, but a lot of my clients in Pocatello are 50 to 45 to 60-year-old females and males that basically just want to move pain free and feel better. And like you said, like you're not going for some crazy stimulus. You're just trying to mentally and physically help them feel better and improve their life. And I really enjoy that. I've almost found more
Yeah.
satisfaction in working with the health side. And then I'm getting into like the training pregnant women side too, like that, which is like not sounds crazy, but yeah. So
No,
the
that's
yeah,
great. Yeah.
yeah,
That's really cool. Yeah. I think, my transition really was like, I don't know. I actually had a discussion with another pole vaulter when I was still jumping, and he had just decided to retire. And this was a kid that I had competed against since high school, and he was an elite athlete. He jumped over a foot higher than me, and made it to Olympic trials and almost made the Olympic team one year. I think it was 2008, maybe. Or 2012. But anyway, he, he said, I'm just tired of doing things for me. I want to do stuff that helps other people improve their lives. And so that was his justification for retiring. And I think that message kind of hit home to me because I was close to when I was ready to hang it up as well. And so I think, I never really thought of that explicitly, but now looking back, I think that was part of my motivation as well, as to, I was pole vaulting and I was training like these insane, intense hours, for me. And it was enjoyable for me up to a certain point where I just got, I burnt out with the injuries and all that stuff. So I realized that I wanted to do something else you know, to help other people and to try to improve their lives. And so it definitely shifted from, the selfish perspective to being able to try to help other people improve their lives. And I think that exercise is a great way to do that. And it's one of the best ways to do that. And the literature definitely supports that. So
yeah, and that supports your kind of getting an education too. You're taking not only are you learning yourself, but you're taking that and you want to teach that or apply that to and help other people, right?
yeah,
Um, yeah, that's what's cool. That's what's cool in the connection I think you can find between a lot of different fields is it's like, fitness is just an avenue that I've chosen to like help people. Like you can do a million different things, but it's just awesome to talk to people that want to help other people and like
yeah,
are driven towards learning to share. So
right.
that's cool, man.
Yeah.
So one question I always ask at the end is, what's one piece of advice from your life and experience that you can give to, and I didn't really prep you for this one, but that you could give to the listeners that they can, something, I like stuff that's more actionable. So something that maybe they could start implementing now.
Yeah. So I think I have two pieces of advice, I guess. The first is to try to get, if you're listening to this, you obviously you're interested in exercise and fitness. The one of the most important things I think that people can do is to try to get other people, friends, family, loved ones, to exercise with them, do something active, and that not only improves their lives, especially if they're sedentary at this point, but it improves the lives of everyone around you, and it has amazing effects on not just your physiology, but psychology, mood, even weird things that you wouldn't even think of, like your financial wellness. So I would encourage people to get the people around them to exercise with them, bring them to your gym or whatever, go on a hike or walk, bike ride, whatever. Because I think that's an incredibly important piece, particularly with the older individuals, because a lot of older people are completely sedentary. And so just a little bit of activity helps improve their lives. The second piece of advice is more so for the people who are interested in the performance side of things and trying to improve themselves. I think in retrospect, part of the reason I got burnt out is because I was going so hard so often that I couldn't handle it anymore. And I actually think that was detrimental to my performance. Great athletes aren't great because they have these consistently heroic efforts in the gym. They're great at being consistent. They show up every day. They might not be going 100% every day, but that's the difference between, a really good athlete and one that is successful throughout their career and one that burns out like I did.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, if you and I are both training and you're training at 100%, but you can only do the 100% 3 days a week because you're so exhausted from the training, but I do 80% and I do it 6 days a week. By the end of the year, I've had way more volume than you, right?
Yeah.
So I think we need to take a long-term approach to training and cultivating our athletes, and not like there's no such thing as an overnight success, particularly with exercise and performance. It's about being consistent and doing things right for the long term. So
That's awesome.
That would be my advice to the youngsters.
Write that down, everyone.
Yeah.
That was great, man. Yeah, longevity. I love it. That's kind of, we definitely play in that principle. When we have kids come, we're like, we don't want this to be a 3-month relationship. So we want to train you for years,
Right.
And that's the focus, is the longevity piece, right? It's cool, you can go 100%, but you have to be smart about it. And you have to, ideally those 100% are game day on the field,
right?
Not necessarily in the gym. So
you don't want to be a practice player.
Yeah. So dude, that was amazing. Last question, I didn't prep you for this either. Just real quick, if you had a book recommendation, do you like to read?
Yeah, I do. I actually have the book that I would recommend is called Peak Performance. It's a book by Brad Stolberg and Steve Magnus. And actually part of that spiel was, conceptually from their book. So it really kind of tries to change the frame in which we view our performance, not just in athletics, but in any field, any profession, really. Americans typically have this really unhealthy work ethic where it's like, you're working crazy hours and super hard, and you end up getting burnt out really quickly.
Yeah.
And I think that this book sends a really good message on how to try to combat that and to be present in the moment in your training or your profession, whatever it is, and to kind of give you the tools to avoid burning out and to continue to be successful in whatever it is that you do. So
awesome. Yeah, thanks. Yeah. That's the HansenAthletics book club, baby. So we'll read that. Peak Performance. Cool. And if they want to find you somewhere or kind of follow along. Yeah.
I'm on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram. I don't really do any of those, but
you gotta maybe think about picking up one of those and kind of share maybe what you're doing with research and whatnot.
I know I need to be better at it. So my Twitter handle is @Ethan_Ostrom.
Okay, and I'll link all these so you don't need to spell them
Okay,
out. Yeah.
cool. And then yeah, just my name for Instagram and Facebook. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'll try to be better about posting stuff on
Yeah.
social media.
Even if it's just like sometimes, yeah, social media can still be a tool for sharing like what you're doing. You know, so if
Yeah,
somebody's
yeah,
interested in kind of following along with that, I know I am. So I would love to follow and see,
yeah,
just update your Twitter once in a while with, this is what we found. This is pretty cool, or
yeah,
something like that. So,
definitely.
all right, man. Thanks
All
for
right.
hopping on.